Okay, let's try this again. I recorded this video this morning and I took too many notes and did not do a good job. So I'm going to do this again. I went out and had a little picket with my SAG brethren, and now it's time to get back to work. So what I tried to talk about today was sort of like what goes into organizing. So right now I am doing my best to find a couple people to help me kind of make some prototype maps. Nothing that I really plan on using in the long term, but just something to kind of like work with my UI and try and figure out, like what is the actual scale of this thing. I'm also looking for an illustrator. I have some friends who are very talented that work in the industry, but I'm having to kind of like schmooze them a little bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what it takes to start a team. I am probably not the best person to talk about this. People have different skills and different interpersonal styles, and I tend to be more of like kind of a go your own way, independent spirit. So there are, different projects have different needs. Like some games are very music driven, so the composer might be the biggest name on the ticket. Some games are very technical, and so the engineer is the top, and some are very like high concept design ideas, and so you have someone who's more like I want to say intellectual, but in their head, who runs the project. And so I kind of think of three different categories when it comes to building out a team to make a game. The first is sort of probably what you think about like AAA, like, right, there's an IP holder. Warner Brothers owns Bugs Bunny. We're going to make Bugs Bunny back in action, and you're going to fight Taz, the Tasmanian Devil. And so, you have a bunch of people on staff, you bring them in, you give them the brief, and then they do their best to make something out of that IP. I really kind of I admire these people because for me, it's very hard to the interview process is very challenging for me. So that's one of the reasons why I tend to be independent. It's just because I don't like to do the things that it takes to convince people that I am as good as I actually am. So maybe that's a self-esteem problem. We can address that another time. But the writers and animators on something like that, they're all kind of cogs in this IP machine. But, they're also stewards of like a storytelling dynasty, and that's something that I really respect. But I think I just have too much of an independent spirit to really go that route. Another way is, you have these auteurs. You have someone like Eric, I want to say you pronounce his name Baroni, and Alex Preston. You have Stardew Valley and Heart Machine, Heart Machine makes Hyper Light Drifter. I don't know if you've played that game. That's a good one. Where they have, they have a vision, and then a team sort of grows up around them organically. And so, those are a lot less common in games than they are in say, movies, just because the specialization that goes into a technical project like a video game, they tend to be very focused, and I really respect people like that. I think me and Eric lived down the street from each other for like 5 years while we were working on somewhat similar games. I've never met him, which I find so silly. There's like sort of the third way a lot of games come about now, like especially independent games, is through game jams, where you get together and as a big group you split off into teams on a theme, and you make something over a weekend, right? Like I used to do independent film 48-hour film festivals is what we called them, and they're very similar. You get a theme, you get a prop, and then you have a couple days to make something. I love making 48-hour films, super fun. I don't work so well in a game jam environment. I'm a designer mostly, and so I'm very helpful in the first 2 hours and the last 2 hours. And in the middle, I kind of feel like I'm just dead weight. Because, I don't work in animation at all. I find that stuff to be very complicated and difficult. And, there's only so much I can really do while people are busting out engineering problems. So I've done 3 or 4 of them, maybe more than that, but I always find that I'm miserable the whole time. If you put me in a giant room full of like 60 people for 2 days, like I just want to talk to people all the time. So I'm a sit at home at my desk, 2 monitors, keyboard and a mouse, no distractions kind of worker. So that's not really my comfort zone. I guess. So I've always thought of the Primer and Arcadia as being sort of like Dwarf Fortress or like Minecraft, where they're very conceptual and they're sort of project driven. So I think of myself more as like, what? That's so weird. My levels are going crazy. Um, so like I think of myself more as like a steward of the project and less as like the the owner of it, I suppose. Projects like that tend to be, they tend to sort of live and die by their community. You usually have like through the chatter, like that's what keeps motivation up and people like engaged with it because it's so high concept. I'm not really great at cultivating community. Sort of the same problem I have with game jams. Like if you put me in a chat room, all I'm gonna do is chat. And so the only reason I've gotten as much done as I have on this is just because I don't allow myself to get distracted. I sit by myself and I work. But I've just come to this point where I can't do that anymore. There are too many tasks that need to be done that require people who are talented in those fields. And I need to kind of find a way to pull back and be more of a support role. And so, you know, I'm in this position where I have to construct a team from scratch, which is really hard to do, especially when you don't really have much of a budget to work with. I have a very, very small one, but this is why I'm raising money. This is why I'm doing a membership drive. So if you want to help me hire on a staff of talented developers and artists and other professionals, you can go to moonlightpress.games. You can become a member. It's $12 a year. It's very affordable. And you get to play games as like honestly, I think the cooler ones because they're challenging to make and they're strange and you're not going to find them other places and you'll get to play them before other people. You can also sponsor the project directly, and then your name goes at the bottom of the page. And that's, starts at $10 a year. You can give as much as you want, but I think that's a very helpful thing to do. And then you can score some social points with your friends, telling everyone that you're supporting an actor on strike out of work and other developers who need something to keep them going. So I think for a game like this, a service-based game, like an MMO is sort of in the same realm as this. The metric for success is members, right? Like Final Fantasy 14 has like 40 million users and like all of them are paying like $12 a month. And that's what allows them to support a team of hundreds of people. And so, once you start showing enough success, and in this case, like once you start getting more members, then, people want to become a part of it and it grows that way. And then, the more members you get, the more people you can bring on and the more successful the project becomes. My goal right now is 1,000 members. That would pay for me to keep working on it through the rest of the strike. A very small amount just to keep me, so I don't lose my apartment. And so I'm not going to get really deep into the strike itself right now. It's still a little bit fresh for me and a little bit angry about some of it, but they are trying to squeeze us until we lose our apartments and our homes. Like they've actually said that out loud. As insane as that is, it's not subtext, it's the text. They're trying to make us homeless so that we take bad deals. Unacceptable. So this is a very challenging time for us in the film industry. This is very high stakes for me. So 1,000 members would at least help me survive. But this is the internet, and it's not out of the question that like 1 million people could show up. So those are the kinds of things I need to take in consideration, like the differences between barely surviving and having more money than you know what to do with, because it seems like those are the two options. And so I would be happy if I could bring on like 2 or 3 people, just if not just to keep motivation up and keep things kind of moving smoothly. But let's say I did get 1 million people tomorrow to become a member on the site. Who would I hire? I could hire as many people as I want or as I need. So I've been kind of thinking about this, like what would my team look like? Like what's my ideal situation? So this is sort of what I'm thinking. So first, obviously I need more engineers. I'm not an engineer. I am self-taught. I can program, but I'm doing my best. I would prefer that we had 3 people who are great. I was thinking 1 Arcadia, 1 Primer, 1 Frontier, but Arcadia and the Primer are very similar. They are conceptually different. Their presentation is different, but if you're looking at actually how it's built and how it's maintained and how everything is connected, they're actually basically identical. So I think one person could kind of be in charge of cultivating that sort of ecosystem, and then another person on Frontier helping me build out the core systems, because right now I have prototype systems, but they are not scalable. You have to have something that will, like I have 100 quests, but like a system needs to be available to make like 10,000 quests. So or like just saving data is something that's very hard. So someone to kind of help me with that stuff. And then a third to sort of bring balance to the force, to sort of go back and forth between things, make sure that, when I know it for me, when I'm working on a project like Frontier, you get really your head right in the middle of it. And then sometimes you don't see problems until maybe it's too late, or you just don't have the context for them. So it's really good to have someone who can be backup to both of these other people, and also, help me with some of the publishing tasks. Like some of these Arcadia games would work really well on mobile. I've had them on mobile before. I've had some of the music games and they work very well. But maintaining something on a storefront is actually a lot more complicated than people think. All the music games are gone from the Google Play Store just because they changed some of the requirements midstream, and I don't know how to put them back up again. I'd have to learn the entire process of publishing for Google. I'd have to find all of the keys, all of that stuff. It's just too much. It's hard enough maintaining the website. Like, that's its own challenge. So having someone who could take over that role would be incredibly useful. After that, I would really love to have a motion graphics person. I have, I think, done a fairly good job setting the visual tone for Arcadia and the Primer. Line widths, shadow depth, stroke, color schemes, all of that stuff. Like I've set this sort of visual language that has a lot of room to grow. I would love to have transitions. The colors I've picked, I think there's a lot of useful, interesting, very simple things you can do with shapes and depth and all of that. And anyway, the reason I don't do it all of the time is because there's so many other tasks to do. I can't let myself get bogged down in like making the tonal recall menu super cool. I used to do that and it took up way too much time. So that's why everything has kind of scaled back and become really simple. And I would love to have someone be their artistic outlet. I think there's a lot of really great, interesting, fundamental, minimalist animation that can be done here, that it's going to be super cool. And then after that, like there's someone's called like a technical artist. I can't really explain what they do very well. I mean, to me, it's all black magic. But I can't explain it super well. But one of the things about Arcadia that I really, really want, but I don't really have the skills for, is, to me, I think of the visual style as being like ink on paper, like it's illustration. And so to have like little bits of texture going on throughout the games where, right now it's just a simple shape, but for it to maybe, as it moves across the screen, it's leaving little bits of ink behind that are wet and then dry and then soak into the page and then sort of fade out and disappear that way. Little things like that make a huge difference, and I have sort of a vision for this that I can't quite accomplish on my own. So having someone who can really focus on bringing that out would make a huge difference. I mean, it's going to be really cool. Trust me. There's also a lot of work for illustration for Frontier. It's so early in the project right now. I have very general ideas about the story, about, the visual style. I am not an illustrator. I can describe it. I can show examples of what I'm going for, but to have someone who can take ownership and create find sort of like a middle ground between what I'm looking for and, what their thing is, and try and, bring all of this out. There's a lot of little tasks too that would be really useful, like filigree, like having little bits of like on the page to just have like branches coming out in the background. I don't know. I'm not going to get into it. I could talk about this all day. A sound designer, because, Frontier is very experiential. There's not a lot of actual things that you do in the game. It's like a Harvest Moon or whatever. You do like 3 things in Harvest Moon. You talk to people, you pick things up, and then you plant stuff. And I guess you brush your cow. Like there's like 5 things you do, and you do it over and over and over again. Frontier is sort of similar to that. You do a lot of like reading and a lot of like communicating with other NPCs, maybe a little hunting, maybe a little farming. And so it's a game that really lives or dies based on the subtlety of the interactions. So there's a lot of work for an animator, but also for the sound design. You know, you're in the forest, you want to have like little chirps of birds, you want to hear the rustling of the leaves. Arcadia should have some subtle sound to it. There's a lot of work for a sound designer in this. Like there's a meditation mini game, and what, you know, how should that sound? Like what kind of background chatter should be going on? Like what's too much? What's too busy? What's something that can help kind of calm you into like a meditative state. And then along with that, also a composer. Music I think of as something that should be really subtle in Frontier. I don't really have any idea about Arcadia. It's sort of like my blind spot, like what the music should be like and where it should go. I think the only thing I feel like about Frontier, other than part of it, like there is a big musical component to the game itself, because you play music with other characters, you find like a piano, you carry instruments around with you. That's how you communicate with some animals. The music, to me, a lot of it is coming from you. Like it's an interaction state. And so, you know, background music is something that I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around. I think, you know, you carry a primer with you in the game. And so I want the music to come from that. Like if you want to listen to music while you're out hunting in the woods, like that's a setting you have to decide. Like I like the idea of a game where it's just, you know, the wind and the trees and then the birds chirping. And if you want to have music, that's totally fine. Because I listen to music everywhere I go. If I lived there, I would have my headphones in all the time. So I think I want to make it more of an active decision to have music, but it also requires a lot of subtlety. So a really great composer would go a long way. Let's see. An educational designer would be very useful, and this is mostly to like rein in my hubris. I've talked to people about the educational side of this. You know, the primer is the main component, and I feel like people think I'm trying to replace textbooks, which is not quite correct. There are textbooks in Frontier. Like you can find one on a bookshelf and read it. Like I think textbooks are very useful. I don't think that they're super useful for everybody. If you're not interested in the topic that you're reading about, then it's not going to do anything for you. I have a physics textbook that I love, and sometimes I just read it because it's interesting. That's not the case for most people. I think of this game, especially Frontier, as counter-programming. Something to give you the opportunity to find something that you are interested in, and then I can point you potentially to a textbook that can walk you through something that you're now interested in. This is more, I think of it more as like a shotgun approach. So, you know, when you're doing something like this, when you're trying to like work against the established pedagogy, I think sometimes you have the potential to go too far and start making decisions based entirely off of not doing it the way people normally do it. And then, you know, you think you're being smart, but really you're just making a bad decision. So if you're going to break a bunch of eggs, it's good to have someone around who can cook. So I know that I should have an educational designer. I should. I don't want to because I think I'm smart. But I also know enough to know that you can't live your life like that. So let's see who else. Network engineer. That's a big one. I've tried. Network engineers are so expensive. This is such a big job. 90% of the reason this game is taking me so long and is so challenging is networking stuff. It's really hard to get help. I know very few people who know anything about this. You know, if I was just making games, putting them on the store, I would probably be done by now. Like, no joke. Like, the website part of all of this is absolute murder. I mean, the login system took me months, and I still am not 100% confident in it. I know it works because I've tested it over like 4 years, but it still makes me nervous. You know, I say one network engineer, like realistically, like 3 or 4, at least one with some assistance. This is one of those where you get one, and then you ask them what they think that they need. And that's why I need 1 million users and not 10 users. So let's see what else. Modeler and an animator. These are kind of like, these sort of go together. I actually don't really know the correct number of these that I need in the beginning. Right now, everything is in 2D. It's a prototype. I know that, you know, the character models are going to need different costumes. I think that's a lot less efficient to try and do in 2D with sprites. I think probably 3D is the correct approach for this. But also, you know, I think that there's not that many. You know, there's like probably 50 to 60 animals throughout the entirety of this game. There's probably going to be, like the characters, they're a consistent style. So once you start making them, they start, they're going to look fairly similar to one another. So I think one modeler for now is going to be enough. I know that I'll need more in the future, and same for animator. I think you can buy a lot of animations, at least for now, like on storefronts. So that job is really more about collecting and collating. And so that's another one where like I might need more than that. A producer. Sometimes I forget I need a producer because right now I'm the producer, but I don't like being a producer. Okay, that's not true. I just have a lot of other things that I like to do that I wish I could do. So having someone take over that part of the job would be very helpful. And then beyond that, Arcadia is a very modular system. So, a bunch, I really just need 100 people to work a weekend, and then I could have all of the Arcadia games probably done in like a month. So this is something that I think about a lot. There's a lot of turnover in the game industry. I feel like every week I have a friend post that they got laid off from, EA or PopCap or whatever, and they're looking for work. And my heart really goes out to them. It's really difficult. I mean, I worked in quality assurance for a long time. Maybe not that long. It felt like forever. Game testing. I was a game tester for a couple years. I don't like it. It's grueling. And then you spend every day knowing that as soon as the game's done, you're out of work. So the attitude is very different in film, I think, because the projects are very short. A movie only takes 3 months to shoot, and that's kind of a long time. So, you hire me, I come on for a day, I do some simple stuff, and then I leave and I move on to the next movie. Like, sometimes you go through dry spells, but that's sort of the way the industry works, like there's always movies being made. Games are very different. They take a really long time to make. They're very grueling. The teams all work differently. You're reinventing the camera every single time. And so, and it's hard to ramp up. The interview process is long and complicated. Everyone has specialized skills. And so, it's something that really bums me out. And there's no, game developers don't have unions to protect them. So you get worked 18-hour days, and if you're full-time, you're not getting overtime. And so, some people get overtime, but a lot of times, you're just there forever, and it breaks people. And so that's something I really don't like. What I would really like to be able to do is, because Arcadia is so modular, it's really easy to pop in, do a game, and then leave. So if you have like a couple months in between jobs, or you don't know where you're going to go and you're suddenly laid off, like I would like to be able to take people in and give them something to do for a little while until they get back on their feet. Like if you just need a month, like we'll make an Arcadia game. If you need a couple months, like let's make IP based on a game. And, I've got ideas for that stuff. I don't have any of the time to do it, but a Morse code game where you're a spy, sure, why not? I mean, that's something we could knock out, take 3 or 4 people, do it, release it, and then just be done with it. So that's what I would do if I had a big fat budget. I would become a home for wayward artists. It's not a great business decision, but if I only cared about money, I would open a Bitcoin casino. That's really not a joke. That's, I've talked to people about it, and I don't know. To me, this has always been a humanitarian effort. This is something that I work on because I think it's valuable, and I'm trying to make something that will help people learn, or at least be engaged with topics like while they're in school, all that stuff. So, I'm in this to help people, not to just make games for the sake of making games or to make a ton of money. So that's sort of like what I think about the rest of that budget. So, and then there's also, you have to think about like administration. You need legal fees, taxes, licensing fees, equipment. There's overhead for merchandise. You got to go to conventions, and that's expensive. Plane fare. You have to have like the stuff that you put up behind you, the banners and the laptops and all of that stuff. It's all, it gets expensive pretty quickly. I should probably pay myself something. I don't really ever get to do the stuff that I like to do. Every now and then. I mean, I do enjoy making Arcadia games. Sometimes if I'm feeling down about it, I'll give myself the opportunity. Like I'm probably going to make a Braille game soon. I'll talk about that in another video. But it's interesting me at the moment. So I would love to just write item descriptions and character dialogue for like 3 months. That sounds so nice. I never feel like I have the time to give that my full attention, and I think it suffers for it. I think the writing is not up to my standards. but I also don't feel like I have the time to sit down and really like make it really good. I haven't quite established the tone yet. I'm sort of back and forth on how jokey it should be, and how dry it should be, right? So like the primer is a very difficult character to write for. Um, so yeah, so this is sort of like my idea of like my ideal team would be like. It's not very big. I think it'd probably be about 15 to 16 people with a, you know, like contractors coming in and out. Um, Sort of a flat org chart. You know, nobody really has a manager. I direct the project, but I tend to defer to expertise. This is why I work with other people, because I know that they're better than me, and that's why they're there. And so I have opinions and I have input, but you know, if I didn't think that you know, were better than me, I wouldn't be working with you. So, you know, these, I kind of think of these as like the intro nodes, and then they will sort of branch out over time. You know, the illustrator will eventually probably become the art director as soon as they have enough people under them that they will evolve into art director. It's super effective. So yeah, I think that's it. You know, if I were like wildly irresponsible, I would just go crazy. You know, if I had 1 million users, that's like $12 million. Like that's enough to keep going for like 3 to 5 years. So, you know, I think a common instinct would just be to like bring on as many people as you can. I see that in tech a lot. But, you know, adding people doesn't always increase speed. Generally, one person can work on a task at a time, and some tasks go in order. You know, at the beginning of the projects, like where it is right now, you can have people just kind of branching out and like experimenting, but there comes a point where you have to start like actually getting some work done. And so I think it's a lot smoother and more stable and less reckless to have experts doing what they do best and not being bothered. And so, you know, I'm totally okay making less money and not having to lay people off, you know, like, because that's what's going on in the industry right now. I mean, Microsoft laid off 10,000 people this year, and it's just because they were irresponsible in how many people they hired. They grabbed people they didn't need, and now those people are out of work. So that's something that's also somewhat frustrating. So I think, you know, based on the current number of live features on the website, I think 1 million members is kind of a lot. It's not clearly not impossible. I mean, it can totally happen. I think it's a little maybe premature. I don't know if my server could handle 1 million people. That's why my first goal is 1,000 members. I think that's totally manageable. I mean, it's really nothing, but it's enough to get me through the strike and make sure that I can keep this going into the new year, and then focus on, you know, maybe raising that bar every couple months. But I would really like to at least be able to bring on 2 or 3 people at first. So, you know, there's ways I can go about doing that. Part of it's, you know, doing these videos. Some of it is, you know, once I get an illustrator going with me and start making like materials that are, you know, that will draw you in. I think some of the animations I have right now will work well on like Instagram. I just don't feel like I'm ready for like an advertising push this month. I think it's going to be at least 2 months till I can really focus on that. But yeah, I mean, the only way that this is really going to work is if, you know, you become a member, you tell your friends, maybe you could post on Twitter. Anything you do is really helpful. You know, get your name at the bottom of the website. That anything is super, super helpful. Remember, moonlightpress.games, and maybe I should write a jingle. I got to get back to work. I've been picketing and working on this video all day. So I'm going to see if I can get something done. Catch you later.